As I sit here tonight in the Oval Office, reflecting on the events of the day, I find myself contemplating the enormity of the task before me. Just 2 days ago, I took the oath of office, promising to serve this nation to the best of my ability. The weight of the presidency is heavier than I ever imagined, and yet I cannot deny that there is a sense of purpose that drives me forward. The challenges of today have solidified for me one undeniable truth. The future of this nation, and indeed the world, hangs in the balance. Every decision, every word I speak, will ripple out, affecting millions. And today, as I sat with my closest advisors, I realized that we were on the precipice of a new era. Our choices would shape the world for generations to come. The day began with a meeting in the White House with my most trusted advisors: Dean Rusk, my Secretary of State; McGeorge Bundy, National Security Advisor; and Robert Kennedy, my brother and newly appointed Attorney General. It was a meeting that felt momentous, filled with tension, as the gravity of the situation pressed down on all of us. The topic of discussion was Cuba, and as Rusk laid out the growing threat posed by Fidel Castro's government, it became clear that the situation was far more precarious than we had initially realized. "Mr. President," Rusk said, his voice solemn, "the situation in Cuba has reached a point where action is inevitable. Castro's government is growing bolder, and his connections to the Soviet Union only deepen the threat. We cannot afford to let this island remain a communist stronghold so close to our shores. This is a direct challenge to the American way of life." I nodded, feeling the weight of the responsibility settling on my shoulders. It wasn't just the Cuban Revolution that concerned me. It was the broader implications of communism spreading across the Western Hemisphere. The United States had long seen itself as the leader of the free world, and now we were facing an enemy that sought to undermine that position. But as I looked around at the faces of my advisors, I knew that we needed to proceed with caution. A hasty military intervention could ignite a conflict that would drag us into another world war, a war that we could ill afford. McGeorge Bundy spoke next, his calm demeanor belying the urgency of his message. "The Soviets are watching us closely, Mr. President. They want to see how we react to this. A weak response could embolden them, not just in Cuba, but throughout the globe. The world is watching." His words carried the weight of a sobering reality. The Cold War was not just a series of isolated events. It was a constant, ever-present struggle for dominance between two ideologies. The threat of nuclear war loomed over us, and the stakes could not have been higher. "You must understand," Bundy continued, "this is a battle for the hearts and minds of the world. Our response today will determine the course of history." I stood up from the table, my mind swirling with the enormity of it all. In moments like these, it is easy to become overwhelmed. The pressure is immense. Every decision carries consequences that are felt not only by our nation, but by people across the globe. But as I looked out the window of the Oval Office, I thought of the American people, the millions of men and women who trusted me to make the right choices. I owed them my best effort. I would not let fear guide my actions. After the meeting, I walked alone through the White House grounds, the cold January air biting at my skin. The weight of the decisions to be made was unbearable, and I needed a moment of solitude to clear my mind. It is during these moments of quiet reflection that I often find clarity. My thoughts drifted to the men who had occupied this office before me: Washington, Jefferson, Lincoln. They, too, had faced challenges that seemed insurmountable, moments when history seemed to stand still, waiting for them to act. Their choices had shaped the future. And now it was my turn. As I walked, I found myself thinking about the other great challenge of our time: civil rights. Robert, my brother, had been working tirelessly on this front. His passion for justice and his unwavering commitment to the cause of racial equality had always inspired me. But now I saw the full extent of the task ahead. The fight for civil rights was not just a moral imperative, it was a political one too. The American people needed to see that we were not only confronting the forces of tyranny abroad, but also addressing the inequities that existed in our own society. The civil rights movement was gaining momentum, and it was clear that we could not afford to let this issue slide into the background. When I met with Robert later in the day, he was as resolute as ever. "Jack," he said, "we have to act on this. The time for words is over. We need to pass legislation that guarantees equality for all Americans, regardless of race. If we don't, we risk losing the moral authority we claim to have in the world." His words resonated with me deeply. How could we stand up to communist regimes abroad if we failed to live up to the ideals of freedom and equality at home? The two issues, foreign and domestic, were interconnected, each influencing the other. If we were to lead the world, we had to lead by example. The question of civil rights was not just a political issue. It was a question of our soul as a nation. Later, in the evening, I had a quiet dinner with Jacqueline. We discussed the day's events, and I could see the concern in her eyes. She always has a way of grounding me, reminding me of what is truly important. "Jack," she said softly, "I know how much pressure you're under, but remember that this is not just about winning battles. It's about what kind of country we want to be. Don't lose sight of that." Her words reminded me of the deeper purpose of leadership. It's not just about making decisions based on short-term gains. It is about setting the course for the future, about ensuring that we leave a legacy of hope, justice, and equality. Jacqueline always has a way of putting things into perspective, and her support is a constant source of strength. As the day draws to a close, I find myself reflecting on the decisions that lay ahead. The choices we make now will reverberate through history, shaping the future of this country and the world. And as I prepare for the challenges of the coming days, I am reminded that leadership is not just about power, it is about responsibility. It is about making the difficult decisions, even when the path ahead is unclear. And is about doing what is right, even when it is not easy. Tonight, I am filled with a sense of resolve. The stakes are high, but I believe in the American people, and I believe in the values that have made this nation great. I will face the challenges of tomorrow with courage, conviction, and the knowledge that history will judge us not just by the decisions we make, but by the values we uphold. John F. Kennedy.